Imagine this: you're standing on the edge of a cliff, adrenaline coursing through your veins. Behind you is the endless, exhausting chase, texts unanswered, emotional seesaws, silent withdrawals. Ahead of you lies vast open space, sun breaking through storm clouds, a wind of possibility. That wind whispers, you don't have to chase anymore. You've been running, chasing, hoping that the avoidant will change, or that they'll finally let down their walls. But here's what few ever see: the moment you stop chasing, your life doesn't collapse, it blooms. The moment you release the pursuit, the world breathes with you. The act of stopping the chase is not defeat. It is the first step into your true power. In that pause, in that surrender, transformation begins. You discover truths about who you are, what you deserve, and the unshakable strength inside you. This speech is your guide to that transformation. What happens next when you finally stop chasing an avoidant, and how to rebuild your inner world, reclaim your joy, and walk forward with dignity, clarity, and fierce love for yourself. You didn't fail by letting go. You freed yourself to discover what you were always meant for. Let's dive into the 7 key pillars of that awakening. When you finally stop chasing an avoidant, the first remarkable shift is that you reclaim your identity. This is not just a soft, vague emotion. It's a deep, structural reordering of your inner world. For too long, you may have remodeled your self-concept around someone else's presence, moods, demands, or approvals. You might have crafted your reactions, your hopes, your fears to anticipate every withdrawal, every distance, every pain. You became the chaser, the one who is always leaning forward so the other might lean back. But when the chase stops, what remains is the raw, unaided you, waiting to rise. That reclamation begins with the simplest act: silence. In that silence, when you're no longer scrambling to fill the void with calls, messages, hoping for signs, you start hearing yourself. You hear what your heart has craved beyond the chase. You feel what you've denied yourself for so long: anger, sadness, grief, longing, but also fierce hope and longing for a deeper truth. That silence is your birth canal. You begin to see how much you have given away just to keep someone close: time, energy, attention, self-respect. You notice how much was lost: your hobbies, your friendships, your dreams, your authentic expressions. In that space, you reach toward what's missing: the you that existed before the chase had a grip. You remember what made you laugh. You remember the visions and dreams you had before relationships became about stability or control or proving worth. You remember your favorite books, songs, and images, the ones that spoke to your soul, not just your longing. And you feel alive again. Flickers at first, maybe hesitant, but undeniable. Reclaiming identity also demands unflinching self-observation. You watch how you used to contort and anticipate. You recall the scenes, rewriting your responses before sending, canceling your own plans in favor of waiting, second-guessing every silence or closeness. You remember how your self-esteem tied itself into their gaze, their replies, their availability. In doing so, you lost sight of your dignity, your sovereignty. But now you see it. You will not dance to the rhythm of someone else's avoidance again. This process is gritty. There will be days when you feel lost, as though you don't know who you are without that chase. That's expected because relationships often become our context and anchor. But inside that disorientation is opportunity. You get to redesign the architecture of your identity based on your truth, not someone else's behavior. You begin defining yourself by your values, your vision, your boundaries, your passions. You say to yourself, I am a person of integrity. I am someone who deserves consistency and kindness. I am creative, bold, gentle, fierce. I am someone who will not shrink for someone else's fear. As you reclaim your center, you'll feel the energy of possibility. You'll remember that you have capacities, emotional, intellectual, creative, that were dormant while you were chasing. You'll pick up old hobbies or new studies. You may rekindle friendships you shelved. You'll start investing in projects and dreams that felt impossible while the chase consumed so much. That reconstruction of identity is not small, it's profound. It rewrites your inner narrative from I'll only be enough if they reciprocate to I am enough because I exist. And something else happens. Your presence becomes magnetic. When your energy is no longer entangled in chasing, it becomes vivid and clean. Others feel the difference. You no longer radiate desperation or neediness. Instead, you emit grounded peace and self-possession. And that shift changes how others relate to you, how you relate to them, and how opportunities present themselves in your life. You stand taller, speak more clearly, live more expansively. Reclaiming your identity may come with fear. You might fear loneliness, regret, a sense of emptiness. But that fear is temporary, and behind it lies a deeper truth. You are not unworthy. You are not powerless. You are not incomplete. This process requires courage. It requires you to sit with your shadows, your wounds, your uncertainty. But through it, you emerge as someone stronger, more aligned, more free than you have ever known. And the more you reclaim, the less pull the avoidant has over your emotions. Their withdrawal, their silence, they no longer define your mood or your worth. You come back to your foundation. When their distance arrives, you do not collapse. You hold space. You breathe, and you return to your truth. That reclamation is the first pillar of what happens next. You become fully yourself again, and from that self you can move forward boldly, wisely, powerfully. When you finally stop chasing an avoidant, the second seismic shift is that you rediscover emotional presence. This is different from just being emotionally available. In a relationship, this is about being present with yourself in your full emotional spectrum, no longer numb, dissociated, or in reaction mode. For too long, you might have been on autopilot, reacting to their distance, internalizing their silence, managing your own responses to keep the peace or avoid abandonment. But when the chase ends, you have the space finally to feel, to rediscover emotional presence. You must re-enter your body. You must sense where emotions sit, the tightness in your chest, the emptiness in your stomach, the heaviness behind your eyes. Without chasing, without distraction, you begin to track how grief, anger, disappointment, longing rise and fall. You notice where you held yourself small so their withdrawal wouldn't feel so painful. You see how much tension you carried in your shoulders, neck, belly. You feel the texture of shame or unworthiness that you buried under busyness or hope, and slowly, but powerfully, that buried land begins to come alive again. You learn to name your emotions. I'm sad. I feel betrayed. I feel anxious about the silence. I feel hope flickering. This naming is not self-indulgence. It is clarity. It's the difference between chaos and sovereignty. When you can name it, you can hold it, and that holding is healing. You no longer chase to avoid the pain. You lean into it, sit with it, let it pass through you. You realize that your value is not erased because someone withheld closeness. You begin to feel more of you instead of trying to feel them. Emotional presence also demands tolerance of uncertainty. When you're no longer chasing, the future becomes unpredictable. Will they return? Will they reconnect? You don't know. And many parts of you will want a guarantee. But presence requires that you ground yourself in now, not in imagined scenarios. You stand in your body with what is. You let go of wrestling with what ifs. You return your attention to your breath, your sensations, your inner dialogue. You train your nervous system to be with not knowing without collapsing into fear or reaction. As your emotional presence deepens, your world becomes more rich and textured. Joy tastes sweeter. Gratitude has weight. You find comfort in reading, music, walks, nature, creative expression. When emotions land and flow, you feel more alive, not because someone else is giving you feeling, but because you've unlocked your capacity to feel. You begin to live life through you, not someone else's whims. This presence also transforms your relationships. When you do engage with others, friends, family, potential partners, you come from a place of greater emotional clarity and integrity. You no longer overtly or covertly push, demand, plead. You speak your truth. You listen without needing to fix or control. Others sense your groundedness. You're less reactive. You respond instead of reacting. You set tone and hold boundaries. You can express disappointment without collapse, say no without guilt, receive love without needing it to solve your inner emptiness. Rediscovering emotional presence also helps you intercept relapse into chasing patterns. When you catch yourself feeling the pull to reach out, to text, call, check, you pause, drop inward, feel what's driving the impulse. You ask, what am I trying to avoid feeling? What do I hope will happen? What fears are surfacing? You breathe. You hold the discomfort instead of acting on it. In that pause, you reclaim choice. You learn the acid test. Am I acting from inner pressure or from inner peace? The more you solidify this presence, the more impervious you become to old triggers. You also begin to rediscover healthy emotional regulation tools. You journal, meditate, Breathe, walk, talk to trusted confidence, see a therapist. You integrate practices that honor your emotional system. You realize that emotional maturity is not being perfect, it's being present with your imperfection. You're allowed to feel messy and still be worthy. Over time, you heal the wounds that once made you chase abandonment, fear, shame, low self-worth. You tend to those tender places with compassion, steady care, and truth. One day you look back and realize your emotional world is yours again. You're not outsourcing your mood, your stability, your happiness to someone else's behavior. You have reclaimed your center. You feel deeply, freely, powerfully. That presence becomes your anchor in storms. And when the avoidant re-enters the picture, if they ever do, you no longer lose your footing. You can choose whether to engage or not, whether a connection aligns or not, because your emotional foundation no longer depends on their echoes. Rediscovering emotional presence is not a quick fix. It is a deliberate, sometimes painful, sometimes beautiful journey, but it is among the most liberating gifts you can give yourself. You emerge with a clarity and strength that no chase could ever produce. You become someone who does not run from emotional depth, who holds space for themselves and others, who feels richly, not reactively. And that transformation becomes a magnet for what truly serves your soul. When you finally stop chasing an avoidant, the third powerful shift is that you build inner boundaries and non-negotiables. You step into your sovereignty, no longer willing to be a casualty of someone else's inconsistency or fear. Boundary creation is not about erecting walls of coldness or animosity. It's about defining your terrain, your sacred minimums, and your self-respect. It is the skeletal structure of your new relational architecture. First, you must identify what matters to you. What are your deal breakers? What behaviors you will not tolerate? Silence for days with no explanation, gaslighting, lack of transparency, emotional manipulation. You distill these into your internal code. You consciously choose the rules by which you will be treated. And when you know them, you hold them, not rigidly, but with clarity, firmness, and compassion for yourself. Those boundaries begin inward, not outward. You must monitor yourself. When do you catch the urge to respond to them instantly, to override your own needs to keep the peace? When do you override your intuition in favor of hopeful illusions? You catch those interior impulses and you intervene. You choose not to act from compulsion, but from clarity. You give yourself permission to honor your own boundaries, even when they feel scary or lonely. You practice saying no gently but firmly when a request or behavior violates your non-negotiables. You don't need to explain or justify. Your no carries weight because it comes from self-respect. You train yourself to see warning signs, not as triggers to fix things, but signals to protect your boundaries. If the avoidant withdraws without communication, you no longer chase. You withdraw your emotional energy. If they ghost, you lean into your non-negotiables. You don't chase, you don't message, you don't spiral. You enforce the boundary of dignity. You may give space, but you don't allow your worth to be undermined. Boundaries also reshape your internal dialogue. You reprogram the narrative, I will be treated with respect or I will walk away. My feelings deserve consideration. I won't shrink for someone else's discomfort. You solidify your self-worth by refusing patterns that diminish you. This internal restructuring is the backbone that prevents regression. When emotions hit, loneliness, longing, fear, you reach first for your boundaries, not for the phone. As you practice boundaries outward, your relationships, including with the avoidant, change. They no longer have unlimited emotional access or power to yank you around. They must negotiate on your terms. If someone truly values you, they will either step up or step away. You are clear, either engage with integrity or don't engage at all. You create relational clarity. You no longer accept ambiguity as default, not because you're demanding control, but because you're choosing dignity. Boundaries also extend to your time, attention, energy. You decide what you will invest in and what you will not. You may limit how often you check in, how much emotional labor you shoulder for someone who has not earned that space. You protect your peace. You learn to say, not now. I need distance. I choose other priorities. You rediscover that your life is bigger than this one relationship. Your friendships, your work, your creativity, they deserve space and energy. As you strengthen your inner boundaries, something remarkable happens. Your self-respect becomes the magnet that draws people who operate at your level. You stop tolerating behaviors that once felt normal. You recognize when someone's behavior violates your core code, and you respond accordingly. People may push back. The avoidant may test your limits, push your boundaries, come forward only to pull away. But you stand your ground. You do not cave to fear or guilt. You hold your dignity steady. Over time, those boundaries feel less like walls and more like fences around a garden. They protect your inner terrain while still allowing love, connection, flexibility, kindness, but only when aligned with your respect and values. You are safe with people who walk within your boundaries and clear when someone steps outside. This boundary architecture is your fallback when emotions surge. When longing or fear arises, you don't collapse into old patterns. You check which boundary is being compromised. You return to your non-negotiables. You reassert, this is how I choose to be treated. And even if someone doesn't comply, you won't internalize their refusal as your inadequacy. You will hold your standards. You will carry forward with integrity. Building inner boundaries and non-negotiables is not cold or unloving. It is fiercely loving toward yourself. It is the statement, I will not lose myself to maintain connection. It is your boundary in action. I will treat you with kindness and respect, but I will also treat myself that same way. And from this place of dignified strength, your relational world alters, because you are no longer prey to emotional chaos. You become the calm center, the grounded force. And that is an entirely new evolutionary platform from which to engage life and love. When you finally stop chasing an avoidant, the fourth epic shift is that you attract healthier connections. When your energy no longer vibrates with desperation, need, or uncertainty, you emit a clearer frequency, one rooted in self-respect, stability, integrity, and wholeness. And that vibration becomes magnetic. What used to attract confusion, inconsistency, or emotional labor now repels it. You become a beacon for people who move with presence, respect, emotional availability, and reciprocity. First, you reframe how you perceive potential connections. You begin to observe not only who shows up, but how they show up. You feel the difference between someone who seeks you to fill a void versus someone who seeks you to share life. You see the difference between flirtation and emotional alignment, between casual interest and aligned intention. Because you've come from the pursuit, your radar is fine-tuned. You detect red flags, inconsistent behavior, avoidant signals, emotional withholding. You see desirers who overpromise and underdeliver, or who ask you to chase them. You no longer rationalize these patterns. You name them. You refuse them. As you engage with new people, friendships, romantic interests, collaborators, you carry your reclaimed identity, your emotional presence, your boundaries. You don't enter relationships from lack, you enter from fullness. You gauge whether someone can meet you in your clarity, whether they can sustain emotional integrity. You talk about needs, you listen deeply, and you don't apologize for expecting alignment. Yes, this feels risky, but as you show up as your real self, the right people will rise to you. They will not demand you dim your light, they will celebrate it. Through this shift, many past relationships reorganize in your awareness. You see how certain people were never capable of what you desired. You forgive, not so much for them, but for your own peace. You release the emotional investment in those who could not show up. You hold gratitude for their lessons, but you draw boundaries around continuing engagement. You do not stay in cycles out of familiarity or hope. One important change: your standards rise not out of rigidity, but out of discernment. You begin requiring emotional follow-through, consistency, communication, mutual effort. You refuse to entertain cases where you do 90% and they do 10%. You want someone who meets you with proportional investment. And because your energy has upgraded, you often surprise yourself. People you once thought unreachable or too good now appear, because they sense you are no longer available to be devalued or swayed. You have made room for what truly matches. As healthier people come in, your relational potential expands. You experience connection without chaos, mutual support without sacrificing yourself, emotional reciprocity without the squeeze. You share, you receive, you love intentionally and wisely. Differences and conflict still happen. That is inevitable in growth. But now you have the internal stability to navigate conflict with respect rather than collapse. You hold space for vulnerability, you speak your truth, you listen with curiosity, And because you no longer carry the overshadowing dread of abandonment or neediness, communication becomes clearer, more courageous, more alive. At times, you may test boundaries, backslide, or romanticize the past. But now you also hold a reference point: how it felt to be respected, how it felt to walk away from chasing, how it felt to stand in your power. That memory becomes a filter. You compare every connection to your empowered self. How does it feel to you now? If it disturbs your peace, you step back. If it aligns, you lean in. Over time, your inner world becomes a magnet, not a vacuum. And the beauty is, people who are moving forward in self-awareness, emotional health, integrity will gravitate toward you. You may be surprised at how many high vibrational souls you meet once you stop scavenging for love in dysfunctional places. You find more respect, more attuned listening, more mutual exploration. You enjoy relationships that are built on mutual growth, not rescue or fixation. Thus, when you stop chasing, you don't end your relational life, you evolve it. You don't resign yourself to loneliness, you recalibrate to higher connection. The pressure to chase dissolves. The pull to settle weakens. You stand as someone who has redefined the rules, because you understand now love worth having is not a chasing game. It is a meeting of souls, and when your vibration matches that of integrity, that kind of love finds you. That is what happens next. You no longer chase, and the universe brings better. When you finally stop chasing and avoidant, the fifth transformative shift is that you cultivate self-reliance and fulfillment. In your past chasing cycles, your emotional state was tethered to external validation, to check-ins, to cryptic signals. But life demands an internal engine, something you can run on even when external response is uncertain. That engine is self-reliance. And from that engine flows fulfillment independent of anyone's behavior. Cultivating self-reliance means turning inward and building your emotional, mental, spiritual resources. You become your own comforter, your own healer, your own anchor. You invest in your inner world, your thoughts, beliefs, habits, self-talk. You ask, what do I truly want in life? What nourishes me deeply? What legacy do I want to leave? You begin to pour into yourself in ways you once waited for others to pour into you. You rediscover joy in your own company. You pick up books you shelved. You sign up for classes you always thought too much. You travel. You spend quiet mornings in prayer, meditation, journaling, creative work. You build routines that nourish you: movement, good food, rest, art, nature. You deepen friendships, community, connection outside romantic hope. You expand your purpose. You may launch projects, dive into a calling, volunteer, mentor, grow in your craft. You anchor in life beyond whether someone responds to you. In that shift, you become more interesting, not because you need to perform, but because your soul stirs. You begin to generate your own momentum. You set goals and chase them. You master skills. You invest in growth. You expand in ways you never would have if your energy remained tied to someone else's distance. Self-reliance also requires trusting yourself. You learn to make decisions for your life, not deferring to fear or dependency. You test your judgment. You make choices even with uncertainty. You remember you've survived the worst emotional storms. You carry scars, but you also carry resilience. You begin to rely on your inner compass. You check in: does this serve me? Does this align? If yes, you proceed. If not, you recalibrate. You stop second-guessing yourself through someone else's reactions. Fulfillment is the result of self-reliance in motion. When you do not depend on someone else's availability to feel whole, you are free to experience life at full tilt. You take joy in small things: a sunrise, a poem, a deep conversation. You take pride in your growth, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. You feel the quiet satisfaction of living with integrity. You are less susceptible to emotional whiplash when someone behaves poorly because you have internal reservoirs. In cultivating self-reliance, you also develop resourcefulness. When pain arises, instead of texting, checking, chasing, you ask, how do I heal this? What practices, people, boundaries, routines support me through this pain? You shift from reactivity to creativity. You ask, what is this trying to teach me? How can I respond with growth, not survival? You reach for journaling, therapy, embodiment, self-reflection. You transform setbacks into launches. An essential aspect: you still value connection, but your fulfillment doesn't hinge on it. You become whole in your own right, so any relationships you form are additive, not compensatory. You no longer tolerate relational imbalance as a trade-off to avoid loneliness. You understand that solitude is not absence but presence with yourself. You enjoy your own rhythm. You raise your threshold of peace above needing constant companionship. This doesn't close you off, it opens you up. From your self-reliance flows generosity, authenticity, emotional safety. You bring someone to the table not because you need them to fill you, but because you choose them from overflow. That changes the quality of connection. You show up more real, more human, more grounded. You attract people who want to meet you there, not move you from need to rescue. Over time, you discover that your greatest project is you, that you are worthy of the investment, that you can meet your own needs for growth, affirmation, love, meaning, and in that discovery, fulfillment blooms. You no longer chase. You channel that energy into creation. You build something alive, beautiful, aligned with your truth. You live a life that says, I do not depend on someone to complete me. I choose to share my completeness. That is how you evolve, self-reliant, fulfilled, dignified, free. When you finally stop chasing an avoidant, the sixth seismic shift is that you elevate your standards. No more settling. For years, you may have accommodation, compromise, quiet desperation, accepting scraps of attention, tolerating uncertainty, discounting your own boundaries. But when the chase ends, a new bar appears, a standard that aligns with your dignity, growth, self-respect, and longings for authentic connection. You stop settling, not as a rigid act, but a natural consequence of your evolving integrity. First, elevating your standards means re-examining what you accept, both in relationships and in life. You scrutinize how you respond to unavailability, emotional distance, inconsistent follow-through. You think, would I accept this from someone I respect? Would I demand this of a friend I value? If the answer is no, then the standard shifts. You stop rationalizing neglect, inconsistency, ghosting, or emotional games as signs of complexity or deepness. You hold those as red flags, not romantic puzzles to solve. You begin to expect transparency, consistent communication, emotional reciprocity. You demand effort, presence, willingness to engage your growth, not just your needs. You expect alignment, words that match actions. You require integrity, vulnerability, accountability. You will not settle for someone who treats you as optional. Your new standard: either you are valued or you are released, not with bitterness, but with clarity. That elevation surrounds not just romantic relationships, but all domains. You raise standards for your time, energy, work, friendships, creative endeavors, self-treatment. You no longer accept tasks, friendships, or projects that drain your soul. If something doesn't serve your growth or align with your values, you refuse it politely or powerfully. You choose quality over quantity, depth over convenience, integrity over ease. Elevating your standards also means refining your vision of love. You no longer accept chaotic, thrill-based relationships as the core of your identity. You look for partnership that sustains, nurtures, and challenges you. You look for someone who doesn't promise the sun and then crater, someone who can hold yourself with dignity even in storm. You look for someone who is consistent, emotionally present, willing to grow, capable of boundaries themselves. Because at elevated standards, you understand that love is not effortless. It requires work, but it should not leave you gasping, shrinking, or chasing. This shift is terrifying because it means rejection, loneliness, risk. You may realize that people you once clung to now no longer qualify, that your relational circle must reset, that some friendships will drop away. But that is part of the transformation, letting go of people, projects, places that once felt safe, but were misaligned is part of ascending. With new standards, you begin to see who truly steps up. You see who is willing to meet you, and who recedes. You see who aligns with your growth vision and who remains in stagnation. And you no longer blame yourself when someone cannot hold your standard. You internalize that their inability is not your failure. It is theirs. You do not lower your standard to make someone comfortable. You rise to your frequency, and those who resonate will meet you there or let go. You also gain inner respect when you enforce your standards. Every time you walk away from something that doesn't align, you reinforce your dignity. You train your nervous system to prefer peace over drama, alignment over compromise, self-worth over approval. You become someone who does not beg. You do not bend yourself to fit someone else's comfort. You stand tall. You act from your highest self, not your fearful self. And as your standard lifts, your relational landscape changes dramatically. You may meet fewer people, but the ones you meet are fewer better. You attract partners who treat you with integrity, who see your boundaries, and who hold honorable space. You draw into your life connections that sustain, that grow, that challenge in healthy ways. You stop tolerating half-love's intermittent presence, emotional shell games. One beautiful effect, your self-esteem solidifies. You no longer idolize someone who treats you coldly. You no longer obsess over responses. You speak with dignity. You respond with clarity. You exit with certainty. You protect your heart but remain open to love that matches your standard. And when such a love arrives, because you are no longer chasing but living fully, it feels different. It feels restful, expansive, mutual. Elevating your standards is not about perfectionism or rigidity. It's about alignment, integrity, and dignity. It's not, I want a perfect person. It's, I want someone who meets me in mutual growth. And if that doesn't available, you are fine with being alone rather than tolerating less. That gap is temporary. Your inner world becomes rich enough that waiting becomes peaceful, not anxious. Thus, when you stop chasing, you don't just restructure how you relate, you upgrade your relational criteria. You align your heart with your highest frequency. You refuse to settle for trickle love when you deserve full love. And in doing so, you become someone magnetic to the kind of love your soul has always desired. When you stand in the ruins of that chase, when the chase finally ends, know that you are not defeated, you are awakening. You are stepping into a realm of personal sovereignty, emotional freedom, and relational clarity that you rarely dared to imagine when you were emotionally tethered. The 7 pillars we've explored today, reclaiming your identity, rediscovering emotional presence, building boundaries and non-negotiables, attracting healthier connections, cultivating self-reliance and fulfillment, elevating your standards, are not abstract ideals. They are lived truths you enact daily. In those early days beyond the chase, confusion and longing will visit. Ghosts of old patterns will try to lure you back into pursuit. But now you carry a new reference point, a vision of who you are without the chase, and how much richer, calmer, stronger that version is. You are no longer defined by someone else's withdrawal. You are defined by your response. You choose presence over panic, dignity over desperation. You return to your center rather than devolve into chaos. Your journey forward is not about never loving again, but about loving wisely. Love that enters your life now must align with your reclaimed self, not fracture it. The connections you form will have to pass your new tests: presence, consistency, vulnerability, reciprocity. If they don't, you don't collapse, you reassess. You walk away or push for clarity, always anchored in your dignity. And in this dynamic, love becomes not something you beg for, but something you choose to share with someone worthy. Over time, you will be astonished at who and what shows up. Doors will open, souls will resonate, opportunities will find you, because your energetic frequency will no longer be entangled with need. It will be vibrated from self-possession. What once seemed impossible, emotional safety, mutual respect, trust without manipulation, becomes possible because you have rebuilt yourself from brokenness into someone whole. This is your next chapter. Release the chase not as a surrender, but as a strategic victory. Stand tall in your newfound clarity. Let the storms come. You have built foundations. Let the ghosts whisper. You have grown ears to listen and hearts to discern. Let those who cannot match fall away. Your field is expanding. You are not alone. Your soul is guiding you. Walk with courage. Walk with dignity. Walk as the person you became in that crucible of letting go. Thank you from the deepest part of my heart for giving your attention, your presence, your willingness to lean into these truths. It takes courage to pause the chase, to face the void, and to rebuild. I honor your journey, your resilience, and your commitment to reclaiming your value. May you walk forward with clarity, strength, love, and peace. Stay true to your path, trust your inner compass, and always remember you deserve integrity, reciprocity, and a love that uplifts you, not depletes you. Thank you and goodbye. Until we meet again, may your life blossom beyond every shadow of the chase.